This is Envision Self-Healing Podcast, episode number 35. Hi, I'm Will Fuller.
And I'm Richard Miller.
And we are the co-creators of EnvisionSelfHealing.com and are dedicated in helping you improve your eyesight and quality of life
by taking healing into your own hands. The topic of the week this week is 3 successful strategies for learning eye exercises, Part 1, Demonstration. And in the question of the week, at the end of the podcast, we'll be answering a question that asks, can I use a light instead of the sun when I do the sunning eye exercise?
So Richard, how has the world of self-healing been treating you this week?
Well, it's been a varied week. As people heard, my mother is going through a health situation.
Right.
And it's progressing, it's getting better and better.
Good.
But I'm still reminded of the consequences, shall we say, of a lifetime of unhealthy eating. And it still comes at a good time for me because I'm trying to change my own eating habits. And I've successfully integrated breakfast now. I'm sort of working my way through the day.
Take it steady.
One step at a time. Now, breakfast is not so bad. I just basically gave up eggs. I swapped eggs for oatmeal every morning. Oatmeal and fruits.
What did you put in your? Did you put fruit in your oatmeal?
Fruit in oatmeal. You know, I somehow got away. Well, I had a dairy allergy, so I got away from putting any kind of dairy on cereal, which most people just can't fathom. But for me, that was an easy one because I've been doing it for years.
Yeah. But what about for me? Because I've just changed over to oatmeal now. The season's changed.
Yeah.
I'm trying a seasonal approach.
All right.
And I don't have enough time to go to the store to
get all the fruits. It is easier, isn't it?
Breakfast.
Yeah.
So what I do is I add at the moment because pears are in season.
Mm-hmm.
So I chop up a couple of organic pears and put that in my oatmeal and some raisins and.
Yeah.
Stick, I didn't know whether you do that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do.
Okay.
So, and that's enough sweetener for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just eat it. And they, in this Gerson training I went to earlier this month, they recommended actually making the oatmeal a little runnier.
Okay.
Again, because people are used to having cream or something on their oatmeal.
But I
don't do that. I just make it as thick as you would normally.
Well, I always see, if you leave it for a while and you come back later on and it's just this solid, I can only just imagine that in my intestine. But one thing that instead of milk, I use almond milk.
Almond milk, yeah, that would be my choice too if I were to do that. I'm trying to keep it simple. I don't have to deal with that either.
Oh, good point, yeah.
So,
just water and oat.
And the other, actually, good tip they came up with on this thing I did was if you make it really runny and then sift off, you can put it through cheesecloth or something. I know
it sounds simple, I'm really glad that you're going simple on this one. Go on, think of it.
This is good.
You won't add almond milk.
This is a good tip. You take off the gruel of the oatmeal, and it's like a protein drink, number one. So you can take it as I know it sounds really appetizing. Right?
Go.
And the second thing is apparently, I haven't used it this way, but it really settles down upset stomachs to do this oatmeal gruel.
So not flat Coca-Cola.
No. So, but if you need a protein, we are all drinking these silly protein shakes.
Right.
This is a substitute to that as well. So.
Cool.
So I'm working my way through the day. Oatmeal, salads for lunch. You've experienced more of that with me.
Yeah.
So, dinner is the tough part because it's, and especially socially. I guess that's my hardest part. Socially, that's just not what people do. Don't eat organic vegetables for dinner. It's just doesn't happen much.
That's always been with all these random crazy diets that I've been trying over the last few years. The hardest thing is going out.
Yeah.
And I know when I went raw for a month, I couldn't go out. Where can you go? I mean, in San Francisco we have one or two raw restaurants, but again, who wants to go to a raw restaurant?
Oh, you happen to be friends with one of my best friends who is a very intense meat eater, so you understand that's part of my problem as well. So I don't know. I haven't been brave enough to. I mean, I've eaten vegetarian in front of her once or twice, but it's still hard. Social, it's peer pressure.
It's a secret.
It's peer pressure.
Shh! Don't talk about the vegetarians.
Anyway, so that's been my food thing. I had a good experience. I went to the zoo.
I didn't try and eat some of the animals.
I was so starved on a vegetarian diet. I leaped over the fence and started...
You stole the lion's meat. or you joined the gorillas and started eating the leaves in the trees.
Yeah, they were eating leaves in the trees.
They're big for vegetarians.
They are, yeah. We saw mainly the little monkeys, but eating leaves. But anyway... So I was spending time, with a 1-year-old looking at zebras and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
I just didn't know as you said talk about zebras. Are zebras black with white stripes or white with black stripes?
I always consider them white with black stripes, but I don't know what that is. That a psychological test or something?
No, I actually think it's a fact. I think they are black with white stripes.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It might be the other way around. I might be wrong.
Well, I did learn at the zoo that some of them neigh and some of them... They either sound like horses or mules, depending upon the specific species. But anyway, these sounded like
if they're
horses.
angry or not.
Yeah, these sound like horses. But I found myself shifting from zebra stripe to zebra stripe.
It's just like the piano, actually.
It is. Yeah, having them run across. Yeah.
Oh, just to explain the piano to our listeners is was it a Bates invention?
I think it was. Yeah.
So basically, the cells. We nearly avoided vision anatomy there.
We did
for the first few minutes. So the eye responds to black, white, right?
Right.
Contrast.
Part of the cell. Some of the cells in the retina respond to black, white. Yeah.
So he invented this thing where he had strips of black lines next to white lines, and then you move it back and forth, and it stimulates the retina.
Yeah.
And I guess. The zebra
running across is exactly the same thing, yes. So I was doing a bit of that, and then the other thing I noticed with the 1-year-old is she gets fascinated with stuff that, we could care less about. I mean, she watched the zebras for 10 minutes, and then there was 10, 20 minutes looking at leaves on the concrete, that kind of thing. And then 5 minutes on the cracks in the concrete. Very fascinating. So I found myself shifting in some ways, along with her, looking at things that I would not normally.
It just goes to show the child development or the eye's development of how it develops and how the reason why we have the macula in the first place is looking from detail to detail,
right?
And engaging with our environment. I mean, who cares about cracks in the floor anymore? If anything. You just want to go and complain to somebody that there's a crack in the floor.
Right, but to her it's fascinating. And it's more similar to, I was thinking back to Caveman Dave, to our ebook. Mm-hmm. It's more similar to primitive man, that babies are interested in things and look at things the way primitive man used to, and the way our eyes were designed to be used.
Yeah.
So that reminded me of that as well.
And I guess we're maybe losing some of that.
Yeah.
With television.
Right, and we were at the zoo when everyone else was watching the 49ers get creamed by the Giants. I was very happy to miss that game. So, and everybody else was probably in San Francisco, was glued to their TV set, to their giant TV sets. So we were looking at zebra stripes and cracks. So.
You got to be careful where you say that in San Francisco.
Well, I did come in. I was watching her, and her mom came back, and I said, we just spent the last 5 minutes looking at crack. Or no, we're doing cracks. She was like, doing crack! Anyway.
Depending on where you are in San Francisco.
Yeah. So, and then the last thing that you and I did together, which was we were laying out rubber tile behind my house. Mm-hmm. And we did that for 3 days, didn't we?
Well, we didn't just do that. We sort of landscaped a whole part of your...
That's true.
Backyard, putting in a stream.
Put in a stream, put in rubber tile, and we had to flatten the space. That was the hard part. That was the thing I was going to talk about, was you and I, Mr. Where and Mr. What.
Oh, yeah.
Someone with compromised periphery and someone with compromised central vision, trying to get a flat surface behind my house out of gravel. It wasn't concrete. We were trying to create a very flat surface.
I guess you do need peripheral vision, really, to see a flat.
I kept asking you what you thought, and then the back of my mind is, does he really have the visual skills to do this?
I've noticed that if I sort of kneel down like a golf player does, in putting, that I can sort of see the flatness. Only the other week I maybe realised why it was always difficult for me to write as a kid in a straight line on a blank piece of paper because I don't have the ends to gauge what would be a straight line, if that makes sense.
Exactly, yeah. That was surprising that you were really pretty good at it, and you didn't have the perspective that, I would have.
It does help that the week previous I was in my own garden
right.
trying to flatten that out as well. It's just funny that we've ended up doing the same
thing, yeah.
Same landscaping at the same time.
So anyway, as you remember, at a certain point, we were using the level and looking at bubbles and doing all this sort of precision things.
Yeah.
And then
squeezing our vision.
Yeah, and then after a while, I think out of frustration or something, I just started walking across the surface and feeling it with my feet.
Well, we were talking about one of our good friends here in San Francisco, who she's severely visually impaired.
Right.
And but yeah, one time when we went on the night walk, and she guided me through Golden Gate Park, even though she was blind, I was useless.
At night, right?
Yeah. And I was like, "How do you know where you're going?" She says, "Oh, well, I can feel with my feet."
Right.
And she was teaching me how to feel with my feet. And it's just one of those things that we switch off from. It's amazing how we forget that we can evaluate. And now I'm learning to walk, say, in my periphery. I'm not seeing as much, so I'm more sensitive to my feet. So you started evaluating
the flatness with my feet. And it worked way better, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I could find all the... We still didn't make it completely. I have to admit, we gave up at a certain point. There's just so much you can do.
Yeah.
We weren't using heavy machinery, so we weren't going to ever get it completely flat. But it looks good.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
So how was your week?
Yeah, good. I've still, even though it's been real busy, we were up early working on your garden most of this week, and it was a bit more of a test of fitting in my new program that I've got going on with my eye exercises, and I sort of worked a bit more this week on integrating the eye exercises in during the day because I didn't necessarily get as much as I wanted to do in the mornings. But it was more that I noticed that I could do it relatively easy, tuning into my periphery when I could. Excuse me, certainly not things like when I was drilling or
right.
one of us was hammering. I must say that I was trying to tune into my periphery because it gives me a better gauge.
Yeah.
I did notice things like when I was trying to focus on an activity, instead of being real centrally focused like I always am, I tried to be a bit more peripherally focused on the activity at the same time to try and balance the two out, which was real interesting. But the exercises still coming on this week. I'm noticing that, before I've always talked about the static being the RP,
right,
and trying to calm that down. This week I've been trying to increase the static.
Okay. Why are you doing that?
So by that, what I mean is I'm trying to increase my observation
of the static.
Right. Because it's really becoming clear to me, excuse the pun, that my brain is switching off from the static because what's the point of paying attention to static? You can't see anything, so stop using it. Let's focus on the central vision. So so it's interesting. It's a challenge because I'm trying to tune into more of this static, and the image isn't as good as if it was just my central vision. So it can be very frustrating because my vision isn't as clear. Right. It can also be somewhat emotional. It can be upsetting because you can't avoid your condition. I'm starting to see the true extent of my eyesight and what the disease is actually doing to my eyes, which it's so easy to ignore. Yeah. Especially when you can just shrink down to the central vision. Right. It's only really when you bump into something or you're in a dark environment, do you think, oh, I've got this condition. Whereas now, my aim is to try and be 24/7 in that blind area, so to speak, or the static area. Because that's really what I think the key is to be there, get the brain engaged again, wants to use it again. And that's where I'm really starting to see more of my periphery wake up that much more. And even, when we were out in the yard, things like I was standing with the sun coming down on me, and I could put my hands out by my side, and I could see my arms and my hands.
Mm-hmm.
Now, something that was interesting is that I went into the shade and did the same thing, and I couldn't see it.
Wow.
So,
in the shade.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you could almost, if I was never in the sun, or I never did it in the sun, it would be like, oh, I can't see anything in that area.
No.
But when in the sunshine, I could
Interesting.
pick it up. So it's that bright light. And it's the same question that I've been asking myself, because the more I tune in to the areas that really are those blind spots, the most effective areas, you want to say, well, is it completely gone? Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing there. But then when I use a flashing light in the dark, I can see the flashing light. So it means that there's something there.
It's just compromise. What's there needs more light. Yeah.
And it's again, it's almost repetition, trying to tell yourself you can see there. You're just you're not used to doing it.
Mm-hmm.
B, the cells are compromised, so it is hard. It's like lifting a heavy weight with weaker muscles.
Right.
It's going to be more difficult. So yeah, really, really trying to do it and stay with it and maintain it, because it is so easy to switch off from the central vision.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed more so when I'm by myself, it's easier. When I'm with a friend or out shopping, it's just oh well, look at that over there. Oh, and then I did. Oh, look at that over there. And oh, quick, let's get on this bus. Oh, no, we gotta get off it. And it's just like you can't. If I just use my periphery, which I've been trying to do, then I just sort of bump into things, take people out, stand on a dog. It's just sort of just all this stuff. So it's certainly a challenge, but it's my next challenge, I guess, is now really engaging this periphery, and I guess that comes with the peripheral meditation that I've been doing, and somewhat of the irony that the more I was doing, it was almost like the worse my vision was getting in a way, right? Because I was seeing more of
static.
The blind spots and what I couldn't.
Yeah.
I was starting to see what I couldn't see.
Right.
And
but you saw that it wasn't black. It was static, which is, I think for our listeners is important, because some people who have these kind of conditions, if you're seeing static, it's better than not seeing anything. It's in between. Yeah. So that's what you're trying to work with, that in-between kind of vision.
Yeah, and a lot of what I feel that I'm improving right now isn't necessarily the RP. What I'm improving is where my brain has switched off.
Right.
From the compromised periphery. Why use it? It's no good.
Right.
You can't function with this.
Yeah.
You need to start using your central vision. You can see a lot clearer with that.
Yeah.
But instead, we make you turn your head more. We make you only look in small areas.
Right.
So that's what the brain is doing.
Right.
And I coined a term. I don't know whether it already is a term or not. But I thought for a while, what could this be? It's almost like I was working on a separate condition. And I coined the term habitual blindness.
Ooh.
And copyright.
Ooh.
For 2000.
I like it.
Because what I was doing is I was improving or waking up the habit of not using my peripheral vision. So what I was waking up isn't necessarily the cells that are affected by the RP. I'm reactivating the healthy cells or the compromised cells, not necessarily completely degenerated like you might have with the RP section. But it's more, engaging that again, which is habitual blindness as opposed to the actual condition itself.
Yeah, that's great.
So anyway, it's been a short week for me this week. But yeah, it's interesting. Again, it's a real process, and a lot of it comes from not shying away from what your challenge is, and spending time with it. And sure, those emotions come up, and sure you get frustrated, but it's all part of working around it and sticking with it and trying to keep going.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm looking forward to playing with that
more static,
a lot more. I wish I could spend more time just in the periphery, but it's such a challenge. The brain really does prefer what's strong.
Yeah.
No different than when I'm obstructing my stronger eye.
Sure.
And, my weaker eye is quite a bit weaker. So, if there's a task that really has to be done,
I know. Yeah.
Trying to do it with the obstruction glasses on is very difficult.
It's like emotionally difficult almost. Yeah.
And the glasses come off,
yeah.
and you just have to go through. But it's trying to stop yourself from doing that, which is a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's about a good time to move on to topic of the week.
And the topic of the week this week is 3 successful strategies for learning eye exercises, part 1, demonstration. So to start out with, it's kind of goes back to how we originally learned eye exercise. And for me, my experience was coming down, it's almost 20 years ago now, of coming down and being told about Mr. Mayer Schneider.
Okay. Coming down where?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Coming down. I was an astronaut for 15 years.
That's good. That's good. All right. Yeah.
Because you've got to be careful as well, because you could be coming down
from
LSD
or... Good point.
After being high for 20 years.
I lived in Washington State for 20 years before I moved back to California.
Okay.
So I would come down the first time I came down, I heard about Mayer Schneider from 3 different folks in my very small town, actually.
Yeah.
He did a lecture up there, and then I immediately booked a trip down to San Francisco and started seeing him, and I had never done eye exercises before. So my experience of learning the eye exercises came from watching him do them. And I guess I could go through my experience in seeing him as a client and learning the eye exercises. It was like he would demonstrate it, and I would try and do what he did. And I guess that's the first stage we're talking about. The second stage was me doing it, him correcting me on doing it. And then it was sort of getting the understanding. He was also telling me the understanding, the reasons behind that, why I was doing the eye exercise. Okay. So that was the process for me. And it's frustrating. I think actually I'm kind of an auditory learner, actually, because of my vision, but because my central vision has been compromised through school, I'm more of an auditory learner.
Right.
So I do need that visual thing, but I'm pretty adept at hearing it or reading about something. But then I do need correction, because I'll often just take off in a direction.
How is your comparison of visual memory to auditory memory?
I think I'm much better at auditory memory.
Okay.
I think, like when, if I'm in a car as a passenger, and this was true of my ex-wife, we'd come up to it and somebody would give us directions. She would ask for directions, I would listen and repeat them back, because she was a terrible auditory learner. She was a very visual learner.
Right.
So I could, because of my vision loss, I think I was able to develop that skill. But I still, even being an auditory learner, I really needed to see it demonstrated and then be corrected when I was doing it wrong. So that was my experience of learning the eye exercises. But then I have to admit that retention of that was difficult.
Yeah.
I would come have a session with him. He would demonstrate it. I would do it. I'd go back and what was I? It was difficult to retain that. Yeah,
especially when it's a new, it's a new skill.
Yeah,
and for we're really starting to realise that a lot of our audience out there really are discovering eye exercises for the first time, and they didn't even know exercises exist.
Just the way I was, yeah.
I guess we were both the same. I guess you always learn something new for the first time.
Yeah.
But so it's really getting to grips with the understanding of good ways of learning, and that this is a process. It isn't just this magical thing that just happens. You can really tune into those things that you highlighted there. So the demonstration is number one, and then the second thing, which was the
my doing it in his presence and him correcting me on the technique.
So reinforce everything that's being done. And then the third thing, which is understanding exactly what you're doing, why you're doing it, so that you've got it down to a...
Well, for instance, in sunning, right? I mean, I would watch him sun, and then I would do it basically imitate the motions. And he could correct me and all that. But then when he said, well, now you need to have, if your eyes go all the way to your shoulder, they're in the shadow, and that's opening up your pupil. And then when you face the sun, the pupil is constricting. That understanding reinforced or gave me the reasons for having the motion be in a certain way. The reasons he was correcting me, the reason he was demonstrating it in a certain way.
And for me, as a physical education teacher, as I was, there was just such a massive emphasis on demonstration, which is one reason why the job was so difficult, because I would have to, one lesson I would be demonstrating the smash in table tennis.
Right.
And then the next thing I would be teaching, free throws in basketball, and it's two completely different skills, and I always had to be good at it.
Right.
Because you're demonstrating. So a lot of the time I just had to get the kids to do it because I was terrible. I was pretty good.
You were probably pretty good.
But things like, table tennis, I never really played. I would always avoid it, right, because it's a small ball going at high speeds, bouncing around the table, not really, the best thing for me. Tennis.
Me too.
I never really played tennis.
All right, we can digress into our sports.
So demonstration is just really important, and it's not that, you get the visual learning and the auditory learning that we're talking about here, because you can just learn the visual side. So, things like sunning, well, you could say, make sure that you're slow when you're sunning. That could be written. But define slow, everybody has their own, so when you actually see it being demonstrated, it's so much more easier to understand. And there's only so much we can describe. I mean, we spent so many months on the website when we did the free conditions page and the exercises in writing at length as much detail as possible in those exercises.
We did do that.
It's just difficult to try and describe these actions. So that's why we went out and we recorded a bunch of those short videos that are up on YouTube to give a brief little
demonstration.
Demonstration, so you've got an idea. But it really is important that you're able to see how an exercise is performed. I mean, one, so that you'll know that you're doing it right yourself. And also, before you move to the next stage, which is the reinforcement, you know that you're going to be reinforcing the right stuff. The right stuff. Instead of reinforcing the wrong things and then having to go back,
which is easy to do. I've done that as well.
But certainly with the visual learners, I mean, myself, I'm definitely a visual learner.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Even things like spelling. If I see the word, I could even look away and I can picture the word in my head and then I can spell it. Which is sometimes when I would have difficulty spelling a word, it's because in my mind I'm picturing how it sounds. Right. So I would spell it how I see it being spelled, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So also maps. If I wanted to get somewhere, I'm so much better looking at a map.
Now, here we are opposites again.
Maybe it's just the what and where.
It is.
And sort of, I memorize where I'm meant to be. Walk 3 blocks, turn right.
Yeah.
So in my head, I'm walking 3 blocks and I turn right.
So now I like a description of the steps, and I remember the steps from listening to it. It's amazing. Yeah.
And it really got me in trouble in San Francisco because all these countries I've travelled around the world, I would always, learning all those maps would just be too much, and a lot of the time I couldn't do it auditory because nobody spoke English.
Yeah.
So I would do it through monuments and landmarks and stuff, right? Yeah. So when I came to San Francisco, I'd be like, okay, turn left at the bright pink house, go right to the purple house that's shaped like a castle, go left down the hill, and then but after a couple of days I was just walking around in circles and realised that every other block there's a pink house, a purple house, and one that's shaped like a castle. I guess more so I was in the sunset.
Well, and there's hills here too, which they all kind of look alike in the beginning actually. Eventually you figure it out, but
So I would think I'm going uphill, and in fact I'm going down the hill, it's all sort of... So that definitely messed with my visual learning skills there, but it's certainly, I guess, a lot easier for me to understand the visual side of things. But also we learn through our environments, right? If we think about as children, we learn from what we see our parents doing or the people around us, how to behave. And, it's very similar to that sort of thing. Even things like learning to walk, right? As a child, you're observing the adults around you walking. So if, this is one reason why so many of us have poor posture, because how many of us learn to walk properly? We do, the Mia Schneider method does teach you how to do that. But it's just something that we don't think about because it should be natural. But so many of us walk in a poor way. And it's just what we've learned from our surroundings.
That's just unconscious learning from demonstration.
And I think a good example we came up with earlier is things like almost subliminal advertising, like smoking. Like one thing I learned when I used to try and help teenagers quit smoking or not start a long-term habit in the first place is the idea that you smoke when you're stressed. And we learned that if you look at a lot of the movies, when somebody's in a stressful situation, the first thing they do is light a cigarette.
Hopefully not anymore, but that would used to be very true.
Now they reach for McDonald's. So it's almost learning by association. I guess. But that's sort of that visual association doing it. So learning in that visual way, when you see an activity being performed, it means that you were so good at repeating what we see in that way. And then by also having the auditory side of things means that you're also learning auditorily, so you're taking in the instructions because it's difficult to read and watch the video at the same time. And it's almost like a double whammy, I guess.
Which is why we designed the website the way we did, to bring in as many ways of learning the eye exercises as possible. So we have some of the short videos. We as I reminded you, we wrote this extensive instructions for the exercises.
We would love to have just done videos. But again, some people prefer
to actually see the text of it to learn that way.
So one thing that's important here is that you try and find somebody that can help do these demonstrations in the first place. So, just by looking on the internet, if you can find somebody local in your area that teaches eye exercises, this is also a reason why we do Skype consultation, Skype sessions, because people can actually see us do the eye exercises. We talk about the reinforcement a little bit later on. Any sort of videos or DVDs where you can watch somebody actually doing the eye exercises, and then you can repeat it again through visually seeing it. Also books, there's a lot of good books out there.
There's some books with pictures in them that give you the sense of how the exercise is done. It does help.
And in fact, maybe we should plug his new book.
Dr.
Mia Schneider's Vision for Life. He's got a new book out in America. And it came out in Portugal a month ago. I don't know how many Portuguese people are listening to this podcast.
In Brazil, in Portuguese.
So, and there's some good demonstrations I know because I was in them.
And I photographed them. Now you say that.
So you can see us in that one. But again, there's different ways. Me personally, I prefer the videos. Seeing somebody that's a veteran at it, they've been doing it themselves, and they're used to teaching other people. Because it's one thing just doing it yourself, and then there's doing it to teach others. And it's important that you really pick up the good.
This is an interesting topic for me too. I just realized, because I am so auditory because of my lack of distance vision, that when I would be in classes with Mia Schneider, I would often be interpreting. I would be verbally describing what he's doing for the non-sighted people in the class. And because for me it was I need everything described in an auditory way to learn it. So it's fascinating.
And that's why you're so good at translating what people are saying.
It's true.
There's so many times, no offense to people that email us and I can't really understand what you're saying, but for some reason Richard can just pick out
what you're saying.
Saying. So no matter what your English is like, just email us. Richard will.
I'll interpret.
Richard will solve it. And also, not so long ago, I was listening to a book on neuroplasticity and how, we learn differently in different ways, and that, the brain grows in a particular area as it sort of memorizes from that activity. So one is visual, one is auditory, kinesthetic, smell, all these different ways that we take in senses is all different ways of learning at the same time. So ideally, if you can, watch and listen to a demonstration at the same time, then, you're learning in both ways.
Right.
It's a really good way of learning activities.
Yeah. So that's if you could have a teacher to demonstrate it for you and describe. For me, it would be someone describing it at the same time in an auditory way. And I just realized Meir Schneider is probably a kinesthetic learner because he's terrible at describing the exercise, which is why I always step in and describe it in an auditory way. So you're probably visual and auditory, and he's probably kinesthetic. So,
between the three of those.
Oh yeah, we got it maxed. But so anyway, that's our first strategy: is find a way to visually experience, auditorially experience someone doing the exercise. Whether it's a book, whether it's a person you can find. You can go to our website, look at the videos, read the directions. We spent so many hours writing, and look at it from all of those perspectives to try and get a sense of how the exercise is done.
And one final thing you can do, actually, if you've only done this a few times, but you can also record yourself doing the exercise.
Oh, good.
Play it back and compare that to the demonstration, the simple, template that's
someone doing it correctly.
And then you can really see the difference between the two. And that we did a big push when I was teaching physical education. Was we would film, kids doing basketball layups or badminton shots, or we'd film them and then they go and watch it, and then they come back again and they reconnect their technique.
It's like athletes, yeah.
So that is,
they are athletes.
that is in part reinforcement, and we'll talk about that a lot more next week. But certainly a lot of little tips there on learn in a better way. So it's a good time to move on to question of the week.
And the question of the week this week comes from an email that asks, can I use a light instead of the sun for doing the sunning eye exercise?
And this is actually a really interesting question, because when I first started doing eye exercises and found out about sunning, I was living in England. And we, most of us that know England know that you don't really get the sun over there.
Right.
So this was a real interesting one for me that I first asked when I first started doing.
And I was exactly the same, because I was living near Seattle. So there was not much sun there either.
So my answer was I moved to Kenya.
I couldn't move. I didn't move for years after that. So I actually experimented. I went to I had an interesting experience going to Seattle to the store that sold the daylight balance lights, in banks. I bought a huge bank light, right? Okay. These stores are where people grow their marijuana, basically. I'm sure that's what their whole market is people growing marijuana.
Is this before or after you came down?
It was when I was coming down. There was actually a guy in my town arrested for growing huge amounts of marijuana in his Victorian attic. Anyway, but
nice. So he did it in style.
Yeah, he went to jail, and anyway, for 10 years for that, I think. Crazy. Anyway,
in California.
No. Anyway, so I got one of those banks of light, and I tried it for a while, and it just isn't the same. It really isn't, in my experience.
And I did the same. I didn't go to jail for growing up. I used the full spectrum lights, the white lights.
Yeah.
So I researched them and bought one of those. And I did sun with it for a while, actually. And so this is where I personally would say that if you don't have the sun and you don't sky,
well, that's the problem,
though. Skying.
All right.
Then the full spectrum lights. And one reason for that, for me, is if you're looking at the constriction dilation aspect of sunning, then you can, in theory, it's doing the same thing, constricting and dilating the pupil as you do it. And I guess if you're used to 100 watt bulbs in an apartment, and you've got your eyes closed and you're looking, relatively close at one of these full spectrum lights that are pretty bright by the time they've got going.
With your eyes closed, we're talking.
Yes. Yeah. Then it's going to be activating those cells a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Now the big difference is obviously the sun is 10,000 watts worth of light.
Right.
Whereas any lamp you're going to get isn't going to be any more than 150, 200 watts.
Right.
So you really can't compare the two.
Right.
Plus the sunlight, you get the vitamin D aspect, you get the release of endorphins, you're getting more activation of the cone cells. There's so many more benefits to sunning than just that fact that you're constricting and dilating the pupil, which is why I would say the skying second, because at least you're getting those sun rays.
Well, and if you're asking this question, you probably live in somewhere like Seattle or London, in which case you're probably sunlight deprived because you're living in these places. Yeah. So if just going out and doing skying instead of sunning would take care of so many, as you say, so many other benefits. Just being outside, even if it's cloudy, it would improve your mood and all of those things. So.
See, the one thing for me at this time is it was in the winter in England, so the sun tries to rise at maybe 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and then it's set again at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, when you work from 7 to 5,
very good point. Yes.
You never see the sun, so there needed to be something.
You're right. Yeah. But there is your lunch break, I have to say.
Yeah, but then as a teacher, profession.
Who's the weird guy out there flicking his eyes at the clouds?
Well, what I mean is you don't have time because you're digging trouble kids. Or, there's a fight. You're on lunch duty. Or you can't. Can't always take that time out. And a lot of the time, increasingly now, our lunch breaks are work, a time to catch up on emails,
true.
Paperwork. It's not so much a lunch break anymore.
Yeah.
So I would say that if you have no
other alternative,
but I would say here the full spectrum light. I would probably stop at the full spectrum light.
Yeah.
There are. Is there another name for full spectrum light? Like what would you?
No, that's what we call daylight balanced fluorescence.
Okay. And there are studies out there. There's a lot of studies. Research them, and not just studies, but just information on how they can improve mood. I know they do it a lot for people that get what they call winter blues, when they get depressed.
Seasonal affective disorder,
Yeah, then they refit the house with these lights. Also in schools, they fitted the whole school with it, and they found the pupils' productivity and grades went up when they had these lights.
True.
Just because it's so much better for us.
Very true.
But it's certainly not a substitute for the sun.
And I think one tip I learned when I did this was don't get the cheapest fluorescent fixture.
Okay.
And then put in a daylight balance bulb in it, because the cheap fixtures have poor electronic ballast, or poor ballasts is what it's called. And that's the thing. Remember when you go into a building and you see the sort of flickering? That's the ballast. Is controlling. So if you spend a little more on the fixture and get an electronic ballast, it won't flicker, and that'll help. Just sort of you don't want to be staring at a flickering bulb.
And if you're somebody that doesn't necessarily want to start installing these in your apartment, if you go on our resources section, you'll see the full spectrum light that I actually purchased at the time, and it's just a desk lamp.
Right.
So what I used to do was just hold the desk lamp relatively close, close my eyes, and turn my head from side to side at that light, and sort of have it constrict and dilate. And if you palm with it as well, and then you're still getting the contrast of the light. So there are some benefits there, and indeed, for our listeners, try it and let us know. Some people might say, do you know what, I see better with the light. I have no idea why that would be the case. But you don't know, everyone's different. Yeah. So, and also if you're somebody that really doesn't get a chance to have that sunlight, I mean, it's sad to think that we can't get sunlight in a day.
No, but you were right about that. I remember that schedule. Like you left for work in the dark and you came back from work in the dark. It's just reality sometimes.
So certainly there is an alternative, but it's by no means a replacement.
Right.
Okay, great. Well, we hope you enjoyed this week's podcast, and next week we're going to be talking a little bit more on some learning strategies. In particular, we're going to be looking at reinforcement. And you can also find a little bit more information on eye exercises and vision improvement at our website at envisionselfhealing.com. And over there you'll find some free programs on how you can start improving your eyesight and some guidance on which exercises you can do. You can also find a free ebook over there called A Modern Day Guide for Improving Eyesight, which Richard talked a little bit about earlier, how we talk more on the natural part of the eye and how it sort of evolved, and indeed how we can start improving our eyesight, or we're actually hindering our own vision just through poor strategies and poor techniques. You can also follow both Richard and I on Twitter and also on our Facebook fan page. And you can also listen to this on YouTube or indeed iTunes, and if you are, then just hit the subscribe button and you'll be able to get one of these sent straight to you every week. So, good luck with your eye exercises this week, and happy healing.
And have a good week.